That's him, the fat pig we have to put up with. At her own wedding, my daughter introduced me to her new husband's family. All the guests laughed at me in disgust until her father-in-law saw my face and froze. "Wait! Aren't you my new boss?" The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. The laughter died as if someone had hit a mute button on the world. I watched as the face of Edward Sullivan, the groom's father and, yes, my new subordinate at the company, turned from mocking glee to sheer terror in seconds. His tan skin turned a sickly gray as his brain processed the social catastrophe he had just caused. My daughter Victoria, radiant in her wedding dress, still held that fake smile she had perfected over the years, but her eyes revealed a mix of shame and defiance. Beside her, her brand-new husband, Charles, looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. The rest of the guests, more than 200 people in that lavish ballroom in an upscale part of the city, shifted between confusion and morbid curiosity at the unexpected drama. I felt my breathing grow heavy, my heart pounding hard under my tailored suit. For a fleeting moment, I considered turning around and walking out of that farce. But no. At 58, I've learned that running away never solves anything. Instead, I smiled, a calm smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Yes, Edward, I am exactly that fat pig, and I am also your new boss." What a fortunate coincidence. I extended my hand to him, a seemingly cordial gesture that was really me throwing down the gauntlet. Welcome to the family. That night, while the newlyweds danced and toasted, oblivious to the storm I had unleashed, I remained at my table, drinking 30-year-old scotch and silently planning my response to this public humiliation. It wouldn't be quick or obvious. It would be meticulous, patient, devastating. My name is Richard Morgan. I am the founder and CEO of the Morgan Group, a conglomerate that spans from construction and real estate development to technology and financial services. I started from scratch, the son of a mechanic from a rough neighborhood and a seamstress. Today, I have a fortune estimated at over $1 billion, 5 homes in different countries, a collection of Latin American art that major museums have asked to borrow, and a seat on the most exclusive corporate boards in the country. I wasn't born with a silver spoon. Every dollar I have, I earned with work, cunning, and, I admit, a certain ruthless determination that my detractors call cruelty and my admirers call business vision. I studied civil engineering on a full ride at a top engineering university, working as a waiter and a night watchman to cover my expenses. I graduated with honors and got a job at a medium-sized construction firm. By 30, I founded my own company with a loan that took me 10 years to pay back. By 40, I had multiplied my initial capital 50 times over. By 50, the Morgan Group employed over 5,000 people and had projects in 8 countries. My personal life was never as successful as my professional one. I married young, to Elizabeth, a beautiful and intelligent woman who shared the difficult years with me, the sleepless nights worrying about debt, the constant sacrifices. We had 3 children, Daniel, Victoria, and David. Elizabeth and I separated 12 years ago, after professional success turned me into a stranger in my own home. The fortune arrived, but at the cost of my marriage. I always made sure to give my children the best. Education in private bilingual schools, universities abroad, connections, opportunities I never had. Daniel studied business administration at Harvard and now runs the group's international division. David graduated with an architecture degree from a prestigious university and oversees our most ambitious real estate developments. Victoria is another story. Since she was little, she showed a rebellious spirit. Intelligent but defiant, talented but undisciplined, she studied journalism against my will. I wanted her to go into law or finance. Then, she specialized in digital communication. She has worked at several startups, none particularly successful, always rejecting my offer to join the family company. "I don't want to be Richard Morgan's daughter," she told me once. "I want to build my own path." I admire independence, but her systematic rejection of everything I represent has hurt me more than I would ever publicly admit. The distance between us widened over the years. Visits became less frequent, calls shorter and more tense, family events, exercises, and forced politeness. And then, 6 months ago, she announced her engagement to Charles Sullivan, a digital entrepreneur she met at some conference on disruptive technology. Charles had impressive credentials on paper, a degree from Stanford, an MBA from INSEAD, founder of 2 successful startups. In person, he struck me as a smooth-talking charlatan, the kind who perfectly masters all the Silicon Valley buzzwords but lacks real substance. When I met him, I tried to be cordial for Victoria's sake. During the engagement dinner, I even offered to bring him into one of our tech companies. His response was revealing. "Thanks, Mr. Morgan, but I prefer to maintain my independence. Traditional corporations like yours tend to be limiting for innovative minds." He said it with a condescending smile, as if he, at 32, understood the business world better than I, who had built an empire from nothing. Victoria looked at him with pride, as if he had just spoken some profound truth instead of an arrogant cliché. That was just the beginning. During the months leading up to the wedding, I was systematically excluded from important decisions. My opinion wasn't asked for, and when I offered it, it was dismissed as old-fashioned or conservative. My offer to pay for the wedding, a tradition I still respect, was rejected by Victoria with a snub. "We don't want an ostentatious Morgan-style wedding. We prefer something more authentic, more us." Authentic turned out to be a ceremony for 200 guests at one of the most exclusive hotels in the city, with minimalist designer decor that cost more than traditional decorations, and fusion food that tried to be sophisticated but frankly left everyone hungry. I didn't ask who paid for it all, though I had my suspicions. The most painful part was the announcement that Charles Sullivan's father would be the one to walk Victoria down the aisle. "It's a sexist and outdated tradition," my daughter told me over the phone. "But if we're going to do it, I'd rather it be someone who represents the values I admire." The knife couldn't have twisted any deeper. My daughter preferred to be given away by a man she had barely known for a year, instead of her own father. Still, I attended the wedding with dignity. I wore my best suit, bought a generous gift, and resolved to be the picture of cordiality. For Victoria, because, despite everything, she is still my daughter. And then, that moment happened. That terrible instant when my daughter's new family showed their true colors, and she, instead of defending me, joined in the mockery. "That's the fat pig we have to put up with." The reception continued as if nothing had happened, that strange social phenomenon where everyone pretends not to have witnessed a moment of extreme tension. The orchestra kept playing. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne. Trivial conversations flowed as if a chasm hadn't just opened beneath our feet. Edward Sullivan, my new subordinate and brand new in-law, tried to approach my table several times during the night, surely to apologize or minimize what happened. I kept him at a distance with an icy glare I had perfected over decades of hostile negotiations. I finished my scotch and was about to leave discreetly when Victoria approached my table. She had momentarily abandoned her new husband and slid into the chair next to mine. Her expensive perfume, a gift from me on her last birthday, filled the space between us. "Dad, don't go yet," she said in a low voice. I know there was an awkward moment earlier, but don't let it ruin the night. I looked at her closely. Her perfect makeup couldn't hide a certain tension around her eyes. "An awkward moment, Victoria. Your father-in-law called me a fat pig, and you laughed." "I didn't laugh," she protested weakly, though we both knew it was a lie. "It was just, I don't know, a weird moment." Edward was nervous. "He drank too much champagne, said something stupid, and you introduced me as the one we have to put up with. What an affectionate way to refer to your father." She looked down briefly but recovered quickly. She had always been like that, unable to hold on to guilt for long, quick to justify herself. "You know things have been complicated between us, Dad, always criticizing my decisions, always disapproving of my path. Is that your justification? That I deserve to be publicly humiliated because I don't applaud every choice you make?" "I didn't say that," she replied, visibly uncomfortable. "Look, today is my wedding. It's supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Can we please just let it go? Please." I studied my daughter. Beautiful, privileged, used to her mistakes being forgiven or ignored. It had always been her weak point, the inability to accept the consequences of her actions. "Of course," I said finally, with a smile I didn't feel. "It's your day. Enjoy it." Her face lit up with relief. "Thanks, Dad. I knew you'd understand." She leaned in to kiss my cheek. "I love you, you know. Despite everything." "I love you too, Victoria," I replied. And it was true. Love had never been our problem. Respect, on the other hand. She got up gracefully and returned to her husband, who shot me a wary look from across the room. I watched her blend back into the group of young professionals that made up her circle. Tech entrepreneurs, digital creatives, influencers, and startup founders. People who considered themselves the vanguard of a new era, who saw men like me, traditional industrialists, builders of tangible businesses, as relics of an obsolete past. Maybe to them, I was a corporate dinosaur, a fat pig who didn't understand their disruptive vision of the world. But this dinosaur built the infrastructure they now played on to reinvent the future, and this particular dinosaur was far from extinct. I finished my drink and stood up to leave. As I crossed the ballroom toward the exit, I noticed Edward Sullivan discreetly following me. I ignored him until I was in the lobby, where he finally caught up to me. "Mr. Morgan," he began, his voice trembling. I don't know how to express my shame for what happened. It was a stupid joke in terrible taste. The alcohol, the nerves. I know there's no valid excuse." I observed him closely. Edward, a man in his early 60s, had been, until recently, the director of operations at a medium-sized logistics company that the Morgan Group had acquired 3 months ago. In the restructuring, I decided to keep him in a similar position, but under my direct supervision. We hadn't had a face-to-face meeting yet. The coincidence that he was the father of the man marrying my daughter was, frankly, astonishing. "You're right, Edward. There is no valid excuse. Please, Mr. Morgan, this doesn't have to affect our professional relationship. I'm a good employee, dedicated, loyal." "Loyal? You just called me a fat pig in front of 200 people, including several business partners and members of our board of directors. Does that seem loyal to you?" He turned even paler. "It was a terrible mistake, I admit it. I'll do whatever it takes to fix it." "Whatever it takes?" I repeated, sizing him up. Interesting choice of words. At that moment, David, my youngest son, approached. Always attentive. He had probably noticed me leaving and Edward chasing me. "Dad, is everything okay?" he asked, subtly placing himself between us. "Everything is perfect, David. Mr. Sullivan and I were just clearing up certain misunderstandings." "I see." David looked at Edward coldly. Even if he hadn't witnessed the incident directly, he surely knew about it by now. News travels fast at weddings. "Do you need a ride home?" "No, that's not necessary. Enjoy the party." I turned back to Edward. "We will continue this conversation on Monday. My office, 8 a.m. sharp. Don't be late." Without waiting for a reply, I headed for the door where my driver was already waiting. I felt a strange weight in my chest that had nothing to do with my supposed fat. In reality, for a man my age, I was in decent shape, though certainly not the athlete I was in my youth. It was the weight of a disappointment that had built up for years. Not just because of tonight's incident, but because of the path my relationship with Victoria had taken. At what point had my daughter, that little girl who used to sit on my lap asking me to tell her about my construction projects, come to see me as an embarrassment, as someone they had to put up with? On the drive to my house in the richest part of town, I reflected on the stages of our estrangement. There was a time, when Victoria was a teenager, when our arguments were passionate but respectful. She questioned capitalism. I defended the creation of value and jobs. She criticized inequality. I explained the mechanisms for social mobility. They were stimulating, challenging conversations, but never disrespectful. Everything changed when she started college. Her social circle transformed. Her role models, too. I went from being Dad, the smart builder, to Dad, the exploitative businessman. Her criticisms became more personal, less intellectual. She no longer questioned the system. She questioned me, my values, my decisions. I tried to maintain a dialogue, to find common ground. I even financed some of her independent journalism projects, even though she frequently published articles critical of businessmen like me. It's her way of processing her identity, the family therapist I hired, and whom Victoria refused to see after the first session, explained to me. She needs to differentiate herself from you, to find her own path. I accepted it. I gave her space. I respected her decisions, even if I didn't share them. And what was the result? She ended up mocking me at her own wedding, allowing me to be called a fat pig, without lifting a finger to defend me. The car stopped in front of my house, a modern concrete and glass structure designed by a famous Japanese architect. My housekeeper, Linda, greeted me, surprised by my early return. "Mr. Morgan, is everything all right?" The wedding was supposed to go until dawn. "Everything is perfect, Linda. I'm just tired. It's been an enlightening day." I went straight to my study, poured myself another scotch, and sat in my leather armchair facing the windows overlooking the illuminated garden. The city glittered in the distance, a blanket of lights stretching as far as the eye could see. My city. I had helped build it, literally, with buildings, bridges, infrastructure. My phone vibrated. It was a text from Daniel, my eldest son. Heard what happened. Unacceptable. I'm with you, Dad. Daniel. Always so formal, so correct. So much like me it was sometimes scary. I didn't reply immediately. I needed time to process, to plan, because something had changed in me tonight. A line had been crossed. And although I kept my cool on the outside, internally, I had made a decision. This would not stand. It wasn't about revenge. That's too basic, too emotional for a businessman like me. It was about consequences. In the business world I had navigated for decades, actions always have consequences, sometimes immediate, sometimes delayed, but they invariably arrive. Victoria and her new political family were about to learn this fundamental lesson. I took my iPad and began to research Charles Sullivan and his family more thoroughly. I had the basic information, of course, but now I needed details. His current startup, investors, expansion plans, the logistics company where Edward worked, its real performance, its vulnerabilities, the Sullivans' financial situation in general. The hours passed as I gathered data, made notes, formulated a plan. Around midnight I received another message, this time from David. Are you okay? I'm so sorry about what happened. That family doesn't deserve you as a father-in-law. I smiled slightly. David, always empathetic, always worried about others' feelings. I replied briefly, I'm fine. We'll talk tomorrow. Just as I was about to shut everything down and go to bed, one last message came through. From Victoria. Dad, hope you got home okay. Sorry you left early. We'll talk in a few days. We leave for our honeymoon tomorrow. Love you. Not a word about the incident, not an apology, just the expectation that everything would continue as always. She doing whatever she wanted. Me being there for her when she needed it. I didn't reply. Instead, I sent an email to my assistant. I need a meeting with the legal and financial team first thing tomorrow. Topic: restructuring of personal and family assets. I turned off all the lights except for a small desk lamp. In the dim light, I looked out again at the city spread before me, the city where I had built my empire, where I had raised my family, where I had won and lost so much. The days of disrespecting Richard Morgan are over, I muttered to myself. They're over. On Monday at 7:55 a.m., I was already in my office in the penthouse of the Morgan Building, a 45-story skyscraper downtown. From my window, I could see the entire city skyline. My assistant, Michelle, entered promptly with a black coffee and the day's agenda. Good morning, Mr. Morgan. Mr. Edward Sullivan is already waiting in reception. Make him wait 15 minutes, then send him in. Understood. Anything else? Yes. I need you to cancel all my midday appointments. I'll be having lunch with Daniel and David. Very well. The usual place? No. Book a private table at the Cardinal. Michelle nodded and left silently. She was an impeccable professional who had been working with me for over 15 years. She knew my habits, my preferences, and most importantly, she knew when not to ask unnecessary questions. At 8:15 a.m. sharp, Edward Sullivan entered my office. He looked wrecked, with dark circles under his eyes and a slightly wrinkled suit. He clearly hadn't slept well. Good morning, Mr. Morgan. Thank you for seeing me. I didn't stand up to greet him or offer him a seat. I just watched him from my chair, making him feel the weight of his inferior position. Do you know why you're here, Edward? To apologize again for my unacceptable behavior on Saturday. No, apologies are irrelevant at this point. I leaned back slightly in my chair. You are here to understand the consequences of your actions. He visibly paled. Mr. Morgan, please. I have 32 years in the logistics sector. My experience, my contacts. Let me interrupt you right there. Your 32 years of experience didn't stop you from behaving like a vulgar slob at a family celebration. Your experience didn't give you the judgment to treat the man who, as you correctly pointed out, is your boss, with respect. It was a momentary lapse, a stupid mistake. Momentary lapses reveal permanent truths, Edward. You showed who you really are, and what you are has no place in my organization. Are you firing me? Not exactly. I'm restructuring your position. As of today, you will be leaving the Director of Operations role. You are being reassigned as an external consultant for our operations out in the sticks. Out in the sticks? But that would mean moving. Here's leaving the city. Precisely. Or you can resign. Your choice. Edward sank into the chair opposite my desk. the impact of my words visible on his distraught face. This is because of Saturday. It's revenge. No, Edward. It's a consequence. In the real world, actions have consequences. You choose an action. The universe responds with a reaction. Simple Newtonian physics applied to professional life. My family is settled here. My wife, my son, just got married. I know. What a shame you didn't think of that before you opened your mouth. He leaned forward, desperate. Please, Mr. Morgan, I'll do anything. I'll apologize publicly however you want. I've already told you your options. The remote site or resignation. You have until tomorrow to decide. I stood up, indicating the meeting was over. Edward rose slowly, as if his whole body was heavy. One more thing, I added as he reached the door. The digital expansion project your son presented to our tech division last week. He turned quickly, a flash of hope in his eyes. Yes, Charles was very excited about that possibility. I've decided it doesn't meet our investment criteria. Too speculative, uncertain return. He should seek funding elsewhere. The hope in his eyes vanished, replaced by a bitter understanding. I understand. I'm glad you do. Have a good day, Edward. And a good trip, if that's your choice. When he left, I stared out the window for several minutes. I didn't feel satisfaction. Not exactly. It was more a sense of order restored, of balance. The dominoes were beginning to fall exactly as I had planned. At noon, I met Daniel and David at the Cardinal. Both arrived on time. Dressed in the kind of discreet elegance that characterized high-level executives in this city. Well-cut suits, but not flashy. Expensive watches, but not gaudy. That air of power that doesn't need to be shouted. After ordering, Daniel got straight to the point, as always. What exactly happened at the wedding? I've heard several versions. I recounted the incident with clinical precision, without embellishing or dramatizing. Both listened in silence, their expressions shifting from disbelief to indignation. Unacceptable, Daniel declared when I finished. Absolutely unacceptable. And Victoria said nothing? David asked, always looking for a more favorable angle. She didn't defend you? She was the one who introduced me as the one we have to put up with, I replied. The rest was just a natural consequence of her introduction. David looked down, clearly affected. He had always been close to his sister, despite their differences. Something changed in her these last few years, he muttered. That circle she moves in, that constant need for external validation. We're not here to psychoanalyze your sister, Daniel interrupted. We're here because something serious happened, and we need to determine our course of action. Our course? I asked, curious to see how far his loyalty went. Of course. Daniel looked at me directly. We are family. An attack on you is an attack on all of us. On everything you've built. On everything we represent. David nodded, though with less vehemence. I've already taken some steps, I informed them. Edward Sullivan has been reassigned. Charles's investment proposal has been rejected. Good. Daniel approved, but it's not enough. What do you suggest? A more structural response. His eyes glinted with determination. I've been investigating Charles's startup, Built to Connect, it's called. Very trendy in the local ecosystem, but with questionable fundamentals. He's looking for a serious funding round to expand. And we could make sure he doesn't get it. We have enough contacts in the venture capital world to send the right signals. Without funding, his company will be dead before the end of the year. David looked uncomfortable. Isn't that too much? We'd be hurting Victoria, too. She's our sister, after all. Victoria made her choice, Daniel replied coldly. She chose that man and his family over ours. Over Dad, still. Furthermore, Daniel continued, ignoring David's objection, there are other measures we could take. The family trust, for example. Ah, there it was. The very subject I planned to address. What exactly are you proposing? I asked, though I already imagined his answer. Victoria receives a substantial quarterly allowance from the family trust. Money that, I'm sure, has been vital for maintaining the lifestyle she's accustomed to, despite her independent ventures. Daniel made air quotes with his fingers. I think it would be appropriate to reconsider that allowance. David put his water glass down on the table with more force than necessary. Are you talking about cutting off her funds? Leaving her with nothing? I'm talking about consequences, David, Daniel replied calmly. No one is suggesting leaving her on the street, simply adjusting the flow of resources to reflect the new family dynamic. I remained silent, watching the exchange between my sons. It was fascinating to see their personalities manifest in tense situations. Daniel, pragmatic to the point of cruelty, David, empathetic to the point of weakness. Dad? David looked at me, searching for a sign of moderation. What do you think? I took a sip of my water before answering. I have already started the process of reviewing the trust, I said finally. This isn't about revenge, David. It's about aligning resources with values. Exactly, Daniel nodded. Values? David frowned. What values are we defending, exactly? The value of punishing someone who doesn't show us the respect we think we deserve? Respect is not optional in a functional family, I replied calmly. It is the basic foundation on which we build everything else. Without respect, there is no trust. Without trust, there is no unity. Without unity, there is no family. Just individuals who share a last name and DNA. David fell silent, processing my words. Finally, he sighed. I understand your pain, Dad. I really do. I was outraged, too, when I found out. But it's Victoria, your daughter, my sister. Daniel, your sister. Do we really want to escalate this into an all-out family war? We aren't escalating anything, Daniel retorted. We are responding proportionally to an aggression that already occurred. The fact that Victoria's family doesn't give her the right to treat Dad like trash and expect no consequences. The waiter arrived with our food, momentarily interrupting the conversation. When he left, I picked up the thread. The decision about the trust is already made, I said firmly. Victoria will continue to receive funds, but in a considerably smaller amount and under stricter conditions. As for Charles and his startup, I will not actively interfere in his search for funding. If his idea has merit, he will find investors without needing family connections. If it doesn't, the market will take care of him. I could see Daniel wanted to protest, probably finding my approach too soft, while David seemed relieved by what he likely perceived as moderation. They were both misinterpreting my intentions. There's something else you need to know, I continued, meticulously cutting my steak. I have decided to restructure the allocation of shares in the Morgan Group. This immediately got both of their attention. Until now, the distribution was clear. I held 60% of the shares, while each of my 3 children held 10%. The remaining 10% was in the hands of key executives in the Employee Pension Fund. What kind of restructuring? Daniel asked, tensing visibly. Starting next quarter, I will be transferring an additional 5% to each of you. I paused, letting them calculate the implications. From Victoria's current 10%, David nearly choked on his food. You're taking Victoria's shares away? I am reducing her stake to 5%, which is a more appropriate percentage for someone who has shown so little commitment to the family business. That changes the entire balance of power, Daniel muttered, quickly processing the ramifications. With 15% each, David and I will have 30% together. With my 60%, that means an absolute control of 90%. I completed. No possibility of blockades or obstructive minorities. But is that legal? David asked, always the cautious one. The shares are in her name. Technically, they are in a trust that I control until next year, when they were to be definitively transferred to you all, upon turning 35. I've consulted with our lawyers. I have the full authority to modify the distribution before the final transfer. Daniel smiled slightly, though he tried to hide it by taking a sip of water. Strategic, he commented finally. And fair. David seemed much less convinced. Victoria is going to explode when she finds out. This isn't just money to her. It's her inheritance. Her connection to the company you founded. She'll feel disowned. Like I felt when my own daughter introduced me as a shameful burden in front of 200 guests. I replied, keeping my tone neutral, though I felt a pang of pain remembering it. The shares aren't just a financial asset, David. They represent the trust I place in you to continue my legacy. Victoria has made it very clear that she does not value that legacy. Or me. The rest of the lunch passed with lighter conversation, focused on business matters and ongoing projects. But I could feel the underlying tension, especially from David. My youngest son had always been the family peacemaker, the one who tried to build bridges when the rest of us were building walls. As we said goodbye at the restaurant's entrance, David held me back for a moment. Dad, just think it through. Please. Once you set all this in motion, it will be very hard to go back. Family wounds can last for decades. I looked at him with genuine affection. Despite our differences, I had always appreciated his humanity, his ability to see beyond the bottom line. The wounds are already there, son. I'm just making them visible to everyone. Back in my office, I reviewed the afternoon's agenda with Michelle. I had 3 more meetings and a video conference with our partners in Singapore. Enough work to keep my mind busy and away from family matters. However, as I was preparing for the first meeting, my phone vibrated with a notification. It was a message from Victoria, from some paradise beach where she must be enjoying her honeymoon. Dad, I just spoke to Charles. He told me he rejected his proposal for Built to Connect. Can we talk about this when I get back? It's really important to him. To us. Kisses. Not a word about the incident. Not a hint of awareness about what happened. Just the expectation that I would continue to be the bank and the facilitator of opportunities, as always. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my email and drafted a message to Edward Sullivan. Edward, I have reflected on our conversation this morning. To demonstrate that I am not the type of person you described, I have decided to offer you a third alternative. You can maintain a position in the city, but with a 40% salary reduction and no executive responsibilities. Your new position will be as an advisor in the logistics optimization department. Your office will be relocated to the second basement level. You have until tomorrow to decide between this option, the remote site, or resignation. Sincerely, Richard Morgan. I sent it and turned back to the window, once again observing the city that stretched out below my tower. My empire, built brick by brick, deal by deal, decision by decision, an empire that Victoria took for granted, that she considered her natural right to enjoy without assuming any responsibility toward it, or toward me. That was about to change. The week passed with apparent normality. Edward Sullivan accepted the third option, as I expected. He now occupied a tiny cubicle in the second basement, where the air conditioning worked intermittently and cell service barely reached. The humiliation was palpable on his face every time he had to come up to the executive floor to deliver a report. Daniel immersed himself enthusiastically in implementing our new expansion strategy in Central America, probably enjoying the prospect of increasing his shareholdings. David, on the other hand, maintained a professional but polite distance, clearly uncomfortable with the family situation but too loyal to challenge me openly. On Friday afternoon, as I was reviewing the latest financial reports in my office, I received a call I wasn't expecting. "Mr. Morgan," Michelle announced over the intercom, "your ex-wife, Mrs. Elizabeth, is on line 2. Elizabeth. We hadn't spoken directly in at least 3 months. Our communications were usually limited to concrete family matters, almost always through assistants or text messages. Put her through, please." I took a deep breath before answering. Elizabeth had always had the gift of emotionally unsettling me, even after 12 years apart. "Elizabeth, what a surprise." "Richard," her voice was tense, controlled. "We need to talk about what you're doing. Straight to the point, as always, no greetings, no preamble. I'm doing a lot of things. You'll have to be more specific. Don't play games with me. You know perfectly well what I'm referring to. Victoria, the trust, the shares." News traveled fast. I wasn't surprised David had filled her in. "Those are business decisions, Elizabeth. I don't see why you and I need to discuss them." "Business decisions? Please, Richard, she is our daughter. You're punishing her for something that happened at her wedding. I am adjusting the distribution of resources to reflect the level of commitment and respect each of my children shows toward the family and the company." "Don't insult my intelligence," she retorted coldly. "This is pure and simple revenge. You felt humiliated, and now you want Victoria to suffer. It's not that simple, Elizabeth. Explain it to me then. I have time." I looked at my watch. 5 in the afternoon on a Friday. I really didn't feel like getting into this discussion now, but I knew my ex-wife well enough to know she wouldn't let me go until she got answers. "Why don't we meet in person? We could have dinner tonight and talk calmly." There was a silence on the other end of the line. "Dinner? You and me? Unless you have other plans." "No, I don't." Another silence. "All right. Where and what time? Pooh hole at 8? As ostentatious as ever, Richard." I could hear an ironic smile in her voice. "Fine. I'll see you there." I hung up and stared at the phone for a moment. What had I just done? Asking my ex-wife to dinner was not in my plans for today, or any day, frankly. Elizabeth and I had a relatively civilized divorce, considering the circumstances. There were no public disputes or prolonged legal battles. She received a generous settlement, the house in the suburbs where we had lived together, and several additional properties. I got shared custody of our children, who were already older when we separated, and the peace of mind of a clean break. The first few years after the separation were tense. Elizabeth blamed me for putting my career above our family, for being absent during crucial moments in our children's lives. I blamed her for not understanding the demands of building an empire from scratch, for making me feel guilty for my ambitions. Over time, the tension gave way to a distant cordiality. We saw each other at important family events, graduations, significant birthdays, and we kept up appearances for our children's sake. But dinner alone, at an elegant restaurant, was something we hadn't done since before the separation. I called Michelle to make the reservation and cancel my evening commitments. I needed to prepare myself, mentally and emotionally, for this unexpected encounter. At 8:05 p.m., I walked into Pujol, one of the most exclusive and acclaimed restaurants in the city. Elizabeth was already there, seated at our table, as elegant and composed as ever. At 56, she was still a beautiful woman, with that kind of beauty that matures gracefully. Black hair with some strategic gray streaks she refused to dye. An angular face with wrinkles she called experience lines. A slender figure maintained with Spartan discipline. She wore a burgundy pantsuit, which I knew was from some fashion designer I should recognize, but I didn't. Elizabeth. I leaned in to kiss her on the cheek, an automatic gesture from our years together that we had never completely abandoned. Richard. Her perfume was different from the one she used to wear during our marriage. Something bolder, less conventional. Punctual as always. Actually, I'm 5 minutes late. For you? That's a rebellion. She smiled slightly. I sat down across from her, thankful that the table was small enough for an intimate conversation, but not so small as to feel uncomfortably close. You look good, I commented, because it was true and because I didn't know how else to start the conversation. You too. Though you look tired. It's been a week. Intense, I imagine. A waiter approached to take our drink order. Elizabeth asked for a cucumber martini, her favorite cocktail. I opted for an artisanal mezcal. When the waiter left, Elizabeth got straight to the point. David told me everything. The incident at the wedding. Your plan to reduce Victoria's allowance and cut her shares. Did he also tell you what Victoria said? How she introduced me to her new political family? Yes. And while I don't approve of her words, I don't approve of your reaction either. It's disproportionate, Richard. Disproportionate? I felt my temperature rise slightly. Our daughter publicly humiliated me. She allowed me to be called a fat pig, and she hasn't even had the decency to apologize. And I'm the one being disproportionate? I'm not justifying what she did. It was disrespectful and unacceptable. But punishing her financially, altering her inheritance, don't you see how that just confirms her vision of you as someone who uses money as a tool of control? Our drinks arrived, giving me a moment to breathe and control my response. It's not about control, Elizabeth. It's about consequences. Call it what you want. The result is the same. You're using your economic power to punish our daughter for hurting you. I took a small sip of the mezcal, letting its smoky flavor calm me. What do you suggest, then? That I do nothing? That I allow her to disrespect me without any consequences? Elizabeth studied me for a moment, her dark eyes as penetrating as ever. I suggest you remember that she is your daughter, not an insubordinate employee or a disloyal business partner. Family dynamics aren't governed by the same rules as business, as much as you tried to confuse them during our marriage. The blow was sharp and direct, as Elizabeth had always been. That was unnecessary, I muttered. Was it, or does it just bother you that someone is pointing out one of your most persistent blind spots? She softened her tone. Richard, you were always brilliant at business. You built something extraordinary from nothing. But people are not assets to be managed. Feelings are not resources to be optimized. A family is not a corporation. I never said it was. You didn't need to say it. You demonstrated it every day. She took a sip of her martini. Remember when Victoria was 16 and wanted to go on that school trip to Washington? She had an important debate that same weekend, a national competition, and I told her she should prioritize her academic commitments over recreational activities. It was the right call. That's precisely my point. To you, it was a logical decision, based on an objective cost-benefit analysis. To her, it was her father telling her that her desires didn't matter, that you only valued her achievements. That's an oversimplification. It's your daughter's perception. And in personal relationships, perception matters just as much as intention. The waiter returned to take our food order. We both opted for the tasting menu, as we used to on our anniversary dinners so long ago. What I'm trying to tell you, Elizabeth continued when we were alone again, is that maybe this conflict with Victoria isn't just about what happened at the wedding, it's about years of a complicated dynamic between you. Years in which she has felt that you only value her when she meets your expectations. That's unfair. I have always supported Victoria, even when she made decisions I didn't agree with. Do you think it made me happy that she studied journalism instead of something with a real future? But I respected her choice. I financed her studies. I even invested in some of her failed journalistic projects. And every dollar came with implicit expectations, with the feeling that she was indebted to you. Is that what she told you? Elizabeth sighed. She doesn't need to tell me. I know her. I know you. You've been generous, yes, but always from a position of power, giving, but subtly, or not so subtly, reminding her that it's thanks to you that she can enjoy the lifestyle she's accustomed to. Her words made me uncomfortable because there was a core of truth in them that I didn't want to acknowledge. So, according to your theory, what should I do? Let her disrespect me publicly and just smile? Keep the money flowing without any expectation of basic reciprocity? No, Richard, you should talk to her. Directly, heart to heart, without strategies, without hidden agendas. Tell her how what happened at the wedding made you feel. Listen to why she acted the way she did. Have an honest conversation as a father and a daughter, not as a CEO and a shareholder. She doesn't seem interested in that kind of conversation. She hasn't even mentioned the incident in her messages, because she's probably ashamed and doesn't know how to approach it, or because she fears your reaction, or because, as she's always done, she's trying to move on by pretending the problems don't exist. Just like her mother, I commented with a small smile. Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. Touché. But at least I learned to face them eventually. It took a divorce, but I managed. Our first course arrived. The conversation shifted momentarily to the food, to shared memories of other restaurants, other times. Remember that little taco joint near the university where we used to eat when we were students? Elizabeth asked, momentarily nostalgic, where we would calculate how many tacos we could afford with the change we had left for the week. Don Pepe's. Of course I remember. I kept going there, even after we separated, until they closed a couple of years ago. I know. I went there too, from time to time. Really? We never ran into each other. Maybe the universe was protecting us from awkward encounters, she smiled slightly. Or maybe we just went on different days. As we enjoyed the following courses, each one more elaborate and visually stunning than the last, the conversation flowed with an ease that surprised me. We talked about our other children, about politics, about art, about the changes in the city we both loved. It was almost like before, when we were a team, when we could talk for hours without noticing the time pass. But we always returned to the central theme, Victoria. What really worries me, Elizabeth confessed as we shared a dessert of rare fruits, is that if you go ahead with your plan, you will create a family rupture that could be irreparable. Daniel and David choosing sides, Victoria on the other, you and me caught in the middle, divided holidays. Maybe even grandchildren will barely know. The mention of potential future grandchildren caused a strange emptiness in my stomach. I had never thought about that dimension of the conflict. Do you really think it would go that far? Family wounds have a way of getting infected and spreading if they aren't treated properly. She placed her hand on mine briefly. Richard, I know you. You are a man of principles, of honor. Respect is fundamental to you. I get that. But you are also a father who loves his children, even if you sometimes struggle to show it in ways they can recognize. I looked at our hands, hers on mine. A contact that was once so common and now felt strange, almost transgressive. What exactly are you proposing? Wait for her to come back from her honeymoon. Invite her to lunch. Just the two of you. Tell her how you felt. Not to accuse her, but so she understands the impact of her actions. Give her a chance to explain herself. To apologize, if she's capable of seeing her mistake. And if she's not, then at least you'll know you tried, that you didn't make irreversible decisions in the heat of the moment. She removed her hand and finished her glass of wine. The absence of her touch left a phantom sensation on my skin. I'll think about it, I conceded finally. That's all I ask. When we left the restaurant, the night air of the city enveloped us. I'll walk you to your car, I offered out of sheer habit. I took an Uber, she replied. I knew I'd be drinking. I'll take you home then. She looked at me with an unreadable expression. Are you sure? I live in the opposite direction. Completely sure. It's the least I can do after. A surprisingly pleasant dinner. She smiled, that smile that had once been the center of my universe. Surprisingly pleasant. What a Richard Morgan way to describe dinner with your ex-wife. During the drive in my Mercedes, we continued to chat about light topics, avoiding the thorny territory of Victoria and my plan. When we arrived at her building, she had sold the house in the suburbs years ago, preferring a smaller, modern penthouse. I stopped at the entrance. Thanks for dinner, Richard, and for listening. Thank you for the perspective. We looked at each other for a moment. Two people who were once everything to each other, now familiar strangers. Just think about it, she said finally. Please, I will. She leaned in and kissed me lightly on the cheek before getting out of the car. I watched her walk into the building, upright and elegant as always. Only when she disappeared from view did I drive away. During the drive home, Elizabeth's words echoed in my mind. Was I being disproportionate? Was I risking the relationship with my daughter over a matter of wounded pride? Or was I, as I firmly believed, establishing a necessary boundary that should have been set long ago? I got home after 11. Linda had already retired to her room. I poured myself one last scotch and went to my study. I turned on the computer and opened the email I had sent that morning to our lawyers, requesting the documents needed to modify the family trust and the share distribution of the Morgan Group. The email was still there, in my outbox, awaiting a response. The lawyers would probably work on the documents over the weekend, ready for my signature on Monday. My finger hovered over the delete option, but stopped midway. Was I really ready to back down? To extend another chance to Victoria after so many disappointments? The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. I looked at the screen. Daniel. Yes? Dad, sorry to call so late. Do you have a minute? Of course. I just spoke with David. He told me about his conversation with Mom, and that she contacted you. So my children were still coordinating, sharing information. Interesting. Elizabeth and I had dinner tonight, yes. And did she manage to convince you to back down on the Victoria thing? Daniel's tone was tense, almost defiant. My eldest son had always been protective of family order, of hierarchies, of respect for authority, especially mine. I'm reconsidering some aspects. A tense silence on the other end of the line. Dad, with all due respect, I think that would be a mistake. Victoria needs to understand that her actions have consequences. If you give in now, it will only reinforce her behavior. He sounded just like me, or like the harshest version of myself. I haven't made a decision yet, Daniel. I'm just evaluating all perspectives. I understand. I just wanted to make sure you remember what's at stake here. It's not just about money or shares. It's about the fundamental respect we deserve as a family, that you deserve as a father. I'm clear on that. Good. I'll let you rest then. Good night, Dad. Good night, son. I hung up and stared at the phone. Daniel's call hadn't been casual. It was a reminder, a counterweight to Elizabeth's influence. My eldest son had always been strategic, calculating. In that, we were too much alike. I sat in my leather armchair, contemplating the night skyline. The scotch in my hand reflected the distant lights. In moments like this, facing decisions that would shape my family's future, I felt the full weight of my 58 years. The conversation with Elizabeth had stirred something in me. Not just doubts about my course of action, but memories of another time, when we were young and fighting together to build something, when Victoria was a little girl who looked at me with admiration, not with that barely disguised disdain she now offered. When exactly had we taken such divergent paths? At what point had my own daughter begun to see me not as a father who loved her, but as that fat pig we have to put up with? On the other hand, Daniel's words resonated with equal force. He understood, as I did, that respect was non-negotiable, that without clear consequences, boundaries become blurred and, eventually, irrelevant. My phone vibrated on the desk. A message from David. Dad, I just wanted to say that whatever you decide, I'll support you, but please, remember that some wounds never fully heal. Love you. So different from his brother. So much like his mother. I took a long sip of scotch. The decision I made now would define not only my relationship with Victoria, but the very character of our family, the dynamic between my children, the legacy I would eventually leave behind. I looked again at the email to the lawyers on my screen. A simple click could delete it, postpone the whole thing, give Victoria another chance. Or I could leave it there, let the process run its course, set a clear precedent. No one, not even my own daughter, could disrespect me and expect no consequences. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in many years, I allowed myself to remember not the successful businessman I was now, but the young man from the rough neighborhood I had been, the mechanic's son who worked until midnight to pay for his studies, the student, hungry for success, who promised his children would never know the hardships he had faced. I had achieved that, undoubtedly. My children grew up in abundance, with every opportunity money could buy, but somewhere along the way, something crucial had been lost, something that all the money in the world couldn't buy. I opened my eyes with renewed clarity. I picked up my phone and wrote a message to Victoria. "We need to talk when you get back. Just you and me. No Charles. No lawyers. No intermediaries. There are important decisions I have to make, and I want to hear from you before I make them." I sent the message without rereading it. Then, instead of deleting the email to the lawyers, I drafted a new one. Postpone action on family trust and share redistribution until further notice. Keep documents in preparation, but do not execute without my explicit authorization. Finally, I called Daniel. "Dad, did something happen? I wanted to inform you that I have decided to postpone any action regarding Victoria until she returns from her honeymoon. But it is not a decision open for debate, Daniel. I will make it personally after I have spoken with her. Face to face. A tense silence on the other end of the line. I understand. It's your prerogative, it is. And Daniel, I trust you will respect my decision, whatever it may be." "I always have, Dad." "Good. Get some rest." I hung up, aware that my eldest son was not pleased. But leadership means making tough decisions, sometimes against the current of opinion, even from those closest to you. 2 weeks later, I was sitting at my favorite restaurant in a trendy neighborhood, a small seafood place I'd been frequenting since before I became a millionaire. Nothing pretentious, authentic, a place no one would expect to find Richard Morgan, the real estate mogul. Victoria arrived on time, which was unusual for her. She was dressed casually but elegantly. Designer jeans, silk blouse, her hair in a simple ponytail. Her skin had a tan from her honeymoon, but her expression was cautious, tense. "Dad," she kissed my cheek. "The expensive perfume, my gift, present again. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for coming. How was the honeymoon?" "Wonderful." "The Maldives are incredible, though the flight was exhausting. I can imagine." A waiter approached. We ordered ceviche to share and fish for each of us. Victoria ordered sparkling water. I, for once, decided to abstain from alcohol. This conversation would require all my mental clarity. When the waiter left, an awkward silence settled between us. Finally, Victoria spoke. "Charles is really disappointed about the rejection of his project. He really thinks it would have been beneficial for the Morgan Group. Straight to business, avoiding the real issue." "Typical. We're not here to talk about Charles or his startup, Victoria." "Oh, your message sounded serious." I took a deep breath, determined not to be diverted. "We're here to talk about what happened at your wedding, about how you introduced me to your husband's family, about the exact words you used." Her face tightened visibly. She looked down at her napkin, twisting it between her fingers. "Dad, I don't know what to say. It was a stupid moment, a bad joke, a joke." My voice was harder than I intended. I modulated my tone. "Do you find it funny to introduce your father as that fat pig we have to put up with?" "I didn't say it exactly like that. We both know you did, Victoria. And it's not just what you said. It's that you laughed when your father-in-law insulted me. You joined the chorus of mockery against your own father. On your wedding day." She bit her lower lip, a gesture she'd had since she was a child when she was caught in a lie. I was nervous. I wanted Charles's family to like me. I said something stupid without thinking. "Is that your explanation? You wanted them to like you? What do you want me to say, Dad? That I'm sorry? Fine. I'm sorry. It was a mistake. A stupid mistake. Can we please just move on? It's not that simple. Why not? Why does everything always have to be so complicated with you?" Her frustration was bubbling to the surface. Always measuring, evaluating, judging. Nothing is ever good enough. Nothing is forgivable. Everything must have consequences. Basic respect isn't complicated, Victoria. It's fundamental. And one mistake doesn't define who I am. She raised her voice, then looked around, aware of our surroundings, and continued in a lower tone. "I made a mistake, a moment of weakness. But that doesn't erase 32 years of being your daughter, of loving you despite our differences. Our ceviche arrived, but neither of us made a move to try it. The problem is, It doesn't feel like an isolated mistake, Victoria. It feels like part of a pattern, of years of seeing your father as someone to be ashamed of, someone whose values, work, and worldview are things you tolerate but don't respect. That's not true, isn't it? Then explain to me why you constantly distance yourself from me publicly. Why you write articles criticizing businessmen like my father. Why you invite 200 people to your wedding but exclude me from any significant role in the ceremony. She fell silent, avoiding my gaze. It's not easy being Richard Morgan's daughter, she said finally. My whole life I've lived in your shadow. When I was a kid, I was the rich girl, the builder's daughter. In college, professors expected me to defend cutthroat capitalism because I was the Morgan heiress. To this day, when I meet people professionally, the first thing they ask is if I can introduce them to my father or get them an investment. And that justifies disrespecting me? No. She looked up, and I saw unshed tears in her eyes. No, it doesn't justify it, but maybe it explains it. I've spent so much time trying to establish my own identity, separate from you, that at some point I started to define myself by opposition, not by who I am, but by who I'm not. I'm not Richard Morgan. I'm not a ruthless businesswoman. I'm not a fat pig you have to put up with, I completed, with a bitter smile. To my surprise, a tear rolled down her cheek. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm really sorry. It was horrible, unforgivable. I was nervous. I wanted to impress Charles's family, who are so different from us. So cool, so progressive. And I ended up saying something I never should have said, allowing something I never should have allowed. Her vulnerability disarmed me. For the first time in a long time, I saw my daughter not as the stubborn woman who constantly challenged me, but as the insecure little girl who once sat on my lap, asking me to tell her stories about buildings that touched the sky. Do you know what hurt the most? I asked, softening my tone. It wasn't the words themselves. It was realizing that my own daughter, the person I've worked my whole life for, sees me as an embarrassment, as a burden. That's not how I see you, Dad. No, because that's exactly what you said. I said something stupid. In a moment of weakness, it doesn't reflect how I really feel about you. She wiped away a tear with the back of her hand. Do you know what I told Charles the first night I met him, when he asked about my family? I told him, my father is the hardest working man I know. He built an empire from scratch. No advantages, no connections, just intelligence and determination. I've never been interested in following in his footsteps, but I've always admired him for that. Her words took me by surprise. It wasn't what I expected to hear. You told him that? Yes, because it's the truth. She took a breath. I may disagree with many of your decisions, your values, your way of seeing the world, but I have never, ever doubted your integrity or your ability, and I've definitely never been indifferent to how much you've sacrificed to give us the life we have. The fish arrived, momentarily interrupting us. We began to eat in silence, processing what had been said. I heard, Victoria said finally, that you're planning to reduce my trust allowance, and my shares in the company, so she knew. I wasn't surprised. Our family had never been good at keeping secrets. I was considering it, yes. And now? I want to know what you think about it. If I think it would be unfair? She considered the question seriously. I think it would be painful. Not because of the money itself, although obviously I need it. My journalism work doesn't pay like your corporate empire. She smiled faintly. But mainly because it would feel like a statement, like you were saying, I no longer consider you part of this family to the same degree as your brothers. That wouldn't be the intention. No? What would it be then? It was a fair question. What was my real intention? To punish her? To teach her a lesson? Or something more basic, more primitive? To protect myself from the pain she caused me? I suppose I was trying to protect what I value most, I said finally. My dignity, my authority as the head of this family. The respect I believe I deserve after a lifetime dedicated to you. I understand that, she replied, surprising me again. And you do deserve it, Dad. You deserve respect. Not just because of your success or your position, but because of who you are, because of how you've loved us, in your own way. She reached across the table and took my hand. A simple gesture, but so loaded with meaning. I am sorry I hurt you. I am sorry I allowed you to be disrespected. I promise you, it will never happen again. I looked at our joined hands. Hers, smaller but strong, determined, as she had always been. Mine, aged by decades of building a world for her and her brothers. I believe you, I said finally, and it was true. Despite our differences, despite the ideological gap that we would probably never fully close, I believed her. I saw the sincerity in her eyes, the genuine regret. Does this mean you'll reconsider the trust and the shares? It means I won't make any hasty decisions, that your words today will have weight in my consideration. She smiled, recognizing that was the most she would get from me for now. It had always been like this between us. Small concessions, tactical moves, a constant dance of approach and distance. And about Charles and his project? That's a separate matter, I interrupted. If his idea has merit, it will be evaluated on its own merits, without favoritism and without penalties for being my son-in-law. Fair. That seems fair. We finished our meal in a more comfortable silence. When the check came, Victoria tried to pay it. Please, Dad, let me get this for once. Next time, I replied, handing my card to the waiter. This one's on the family's fat pig. She laughed, a genuine laugh that reminded me of the little girl she had been. Don't say that. You're not fat, and you are definitely not a pig. No? What am I then, according to the brilliant journalist Victoria Morgan? She considered the question with theatrical seriousness. You are. Stubborn, headstrong, and at times, absolutely impossible. She paused dramatically. But you're also the man who taught me that your word is your bond, who showed me that dreams are built brick by brick, day by day, who instilled in me that true value isn't in what you have, but in what you build. You're my father, Richard Morgan, and despite our differences, I'm proud of that. Her words hit me, deeper than I was prepared to admit. I felt a suspicious moisture in my eyes, which I quickly disguised by adjusting my glasses. Good, I said simply, because any other word would have revealed too much. Good. As we left the restaurant, we stood on the sunny sidewalk. The city bustled around us. What will you do now? Victoria asked. Back to the office. I have a video conference with Singapore in an hour. No, I mean, you know, with the trust. The shares. I looked at her closely. My daughter, my biggest challenge, my most contradictory pride. I'll do what's right, I replied. What a father should do. She hugged me then. A sudden tight hug that took me by surprise. It smelled of her expensive perfume and something more basic, more fundamental. Family. I love you, Dad, she muttered against my shoulder. Forgive me. I returned the hug, awkwardly at first, then more firmly. I love you too, kid. Always. We separated, both a little uncomfortable with the public display of affection, so unusual for us. I'll call you this week, she promised. Maybe we could, I don't know, get coffee. Just to talk. I'd like that. I watched her walk away into the crowd. An elegant, determined figure, so much like me in ways she would probably never acknowledge. I smiled to myself, knowing that tonight I would definitively cancel the changes to the trust and the share distribution, not because respect no longer mattered, but because I had discovered something more important. The true price of respect isn't paid with money or shares, it's paid with honesty, with vulnerability, with the willingness to build bridges over chasms that seemed impossible to cross. My phone vibrated. A message from Elizabeth. How did it go? I replied simply. Good. We'll talk later. As I walked to my car, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. We hadn't solved all our problems, of course. Victoria would still be Victoria. Stubborn, defiant, critical of many of my decisions and values. I would still be me, demanding, traditional in many respects, a staunch defender of respect as the basis of any relationship. But we had talked, really talked, maybe for the first time in a decade, and in that difficult but necessary dialogue, we had rediscovered something I thought was lost forever. The possibility of seeing each other not as ideological adversaries, but simply as father and daughter. In the end, that was the true price of respect. The willingness to see the other person as they really are, with all their complexities and contradictions. And that price, as painful as it was to pay, was worth every penny.